The docking bay of Harmony's gate station hummed with nervous energy. Tae-Wan stood near the entrance, his security uniform crisp and his expression calm. He had been through countless first contact situations in his 5 years as security chief, but today felt different. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension. Around him, various alien species shuffled away from the main platform. The insectoid krill clicked their mandibles in distress. The floating luminari dimmed their bioluminescent bodies to near darkness. Even the usually bold Thorian merchants backed toward the exits, their scaled hands twitching toward concealed weapons. Everyone knew what was coming. The Velrathi were arriving. Ambassador Jiwoo stood beside Tae-Wan, her hands clasped behind her back. She was a veteran diplomat who had negotiated with species that could melt steel with their breath and others that communicated through interpretive dance, but even she seemed tense. "Remember what the briefing said," she murmured to Tae-Wan. "No sudden movements. No direct eye contact unless they initiate it, and whatever you do, stay calm." Tae-Wan nodded. He had read the files. The Velrathi came from a death world where everything evolved to kill. They were apex predators standing over 8 feet tall with muscle dense enough to break titanium. Their claws could extend 6 inches in a fraction of a second. Their bite force exceeded that of Earth's ancient tyrannosaurs. Most species in the galaxy considered them beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The docking clamps engaged with a heavy thud that echoed through the bay. The airlock began its cycling process. Tae-Wan could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Beside him, Jiwoo took a slow breath. The airlock doors opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The first Velrathi to emerge was clearly the leader. She moved with liquid grace, her body covered in sleek silver fur that caught the station's lights. Her eyes were golden and intelligent, scanning the bay with the focus of a hunter. She wore minimal clothing, just ceremonial bands around her arms and a translator device at her throat. Behind her came 4 more adult Velrathi, each equally impressive. But then something unexpected happened. 3 smaller shapes bounded out of the airlock, tumbling over each other in their excitement. They were cubs, each about the size of a large dog, with oversized paws and fluffy fur. Their eyes were the same gold as the adults, but filled with curiosity instead of calculated threat assessment. The entire bay seemed to hold its breath. Several aliens near the back exits disappeared through the doors. Station Administrator Hae-Jin's voice crackled in Tae-Wan's earpiece. "Security Chief, we were not informed about cubs. This is highly irregular." The lead Velrathi, who Tae-Wan assumed was the matriarch Thysera mentioned in the briefing, raised one clawed hand. Her translator device clicked on. "I am Thysera of the Velrathi. I bring my cubs so they may learn the ways of peaceful species. This is permitted under the Harmony Accords, Section 12, Paragraph 7. Hae-Jin's voice returned in Tae-Wan's ear, this time with a note of surprise. "She's correct. Stand by, I'm reviewing the protocols." Ambassador Jiwoo stepped forward, her face composed into a welcoming smile. "Matriarch Thysera, welcome to Harmony's Gate. We are honored by your presence. I am Ambassador Jiwoo, and this is Security Chief Tae-Wan. As per station protocol, we must conduct a security scan of all arrivals." Thysera's ears, which were pointed and mobile, swiveled toward Jiwoo. "This is acceptable. Proceed." Jiwoo gestured to Tae-Wan. This was his job. He picked up the scanning device and approached the Velrathi delegation. The adult Velrathi were easy. They stood still, allowing the blue light of the scanner to wash over them. The device beeped its approval. No weapons. No biological contaminants. No prohibited items. Standard diplomatic arrival. Then Tae-Wan turned to the cubs. They had been relatively still while he scanned the adults, but now their attention locked onto him. Their small noses twitched. Their ears pointed forward. And then, as if they had made a collective decision, all 3 bounded toward him. "Kes Rin Vora hold," Thysera commanded, but her tone lacked real urgency. The cubs ignored her completely. Tae-Wan heard Jiwoo's sharp intake of breath behind him. He heard the click of weapons being armed from the security team positioned around the bay. He heard Administrator Hae-Jin's voice in his ear saying something urgent that he could not quite process. All of his training, all of his experience condensed into a single instinct: do not move. The cubs reached him and began circling. Their movements were not aggressive, but they were not playful either. This was assessment, evaluation. Their noses worked constantly, sniffing his boots, his legs, his hands. One of them, the smallest with dark patches around her eyes, rose up on her hind legs and sniffed at his chest, where his security badge hung. Tae-wan stood perfectly still. He kept his hands at his sides. He kept his breathing even. He did not make eye contact, but he did not look away either. He simply existed in that moment, aware that dozens of species were watching, aware that this encounter could determine the success or failure of the entire diplomatic mission. The cubs' investigation intensified. They pressed closer. Their small growls filled the air, a sound that was both adorable and unsettling. The smallest one, still on her hind legs, placed both front paws on Tae-wan's chest and sniffed his security badge directly. Her nose was cold and wet against the metal. Time stretched. Seconds felt like hours. Then Thysera spoke. Her voice was clear and carried throughout the silent bay. They approve. The tension shattered like glass. The cubs immediately relaxed, their tails beginning to wag. The smallest one dropped back to all fours and sneezed, shaking her head as if to clear it. The other two began play-fighting with each other, rolling across the polished floor of the docking bay. Tae-wan allowed himself to breathe normally again. He looked at Thysera, who was watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Her ears were forward, her posture relaxed, but there was something in her golden eyes that suggested she had learned something important. Jiwoo moved to stand beside Tae-wan, her diplomatic smile returning. Matriarch, if you and your delegation would follow me, I will escort you to your quarters. We have prepared accommodations according to Velrathi specifications. Thysera inclined her head. This is acceptable. She called to her cubs with a series of clicks and whistles that the translator did not attempt to convert. The three young Velrathi immediately trotted to her side, though they kept looking back at Tae-wan with interest. As the delegation moved toward the interior of the station, Tae-wan finally allowed himself to relax his shoulders. His hands were steady, but he could feel the adrenaline beginning to fade from his system. Hee-jin appeared beside him, her expression caught between relief and amazement. What just happened? She asked quietly. Tae-wan watched the Velrathi cubs disappear down the corridor, their fluffy tails the last thing visible before they turned a corner. I have no idea, he admitted. But I think we just made first contact in a way nobody expected. 3 days had passed since the Velrathi arrived, and Tae-wan was discovering that his life had become significantly more complicated. He was making his routine morning patrol through the commercial sector when he heard the familiar sound of claws on metal deck plating. He turned to find all three cubs racing toward him, their handlers running behind them and shouting apologies in broken common. Chief Tae-wan, we are very sorry, gasped one of the younger Velrathi males. They escaped again. We do not understand why they keep seeking you. The cubs reached Tae-wan and immediately began their sniffing ritual. Kes, the smallest one with the dark eye patches, climbed up his leg using her small claws. Tae-wan had learned to wear reinforced pants for these encounters. He knelt down, making it easier for them to investigate him, which seemed to be their goal anyway. It is fine, Tae-wan said to the handler. They are not causing harm. The handler looked uncertain but nodded. The matriarch wishes to know why this happens. Cubs do not normally behave this way with outsiders. Tae-wan had been wondering the same thing. He had asked around, consulted the station's database, even reached out to xenobiologists on other stations. Nobody had a good answer. The cubs' behavior was unprecedented. Later that day, Tae-wan found himself in Administrator Hye-jin's office along with young officer Dong-hyun, who had been assigned to research Velrathi culture. Dong-hyun spread several data tablets across the desk, his expression excited. I think I found something, Chief. Look at this. He pulled up a document written in Velrathi script with a translation overlay. This is from their cultural archives, specifically about cub development. It says that cubs go through a phase where they identify what they call safe pack members. It is instinctual based on scent and behavior patterns. Hee-jin leaned forward, interested. And humans register as safe pack to them? Apparently, Dong-hyun continued. But here is the interesting part. The text says cubs only approve individuals who show protective intent without dominance. They can sense aggression, fear, and threat. But they can also sense guardianship. Tae-wan considered this. So when I stood still and let them investigate me, they sensed I was not a threat? More than that, Dong-hyun said. They sensed you would protect them if needed. At least that is what the cultural texts suggest. Hee-jin sat back in her chair, a small smile on her face. Well, that explains a lot about why the negotiations are going better than expected. The cubs chose you, and the Velrathi take that seriously. She was right. The treaty talks had progressed smoothly over the past 3 days. The Velrathi were seeking access to mineral-rich asteroid fields that 3 other species also claimed. It was a complicated situation with centuries of competing territorial claims. But somehow, with the Velrathi more relaxed and trusting of the human delegation, compromises were being found. Ambassador Jiwoo had told Taewon privately that Matriarch Thaisara seemed more willing to listen to human suggestions than anyone had anticipated. "Whatever you did with those cubs," Jiwoo had said, "keep doing it." That evening, Taewon was finishing his shift when he received a message from the Velrathi quarters. Thaisara requested his presence for a private conversation. The Velrathi section of the diplomatic wing was warm and dimly lit, matching the environmental preferences of their species. Taewon announced himself at the entrance, and a young Velrathi guard escorted him to a common room where Thaisara waited. She was alone except for the 3 cubs, who immediately abandoned the pile of enrichment toys they had been playing with and rushed to Taewon. He was ready this time and knelt immediately. Kes climbed into his lap. Rin and Vora pressed against his sides, their purring vibrating through his body. Thaisara watched this with her unreadable golden eyes. Her translator clicked on, "Sit, Security Chief Taewon. We must speak." Taewon carefully stood, the cubs still trying to maintain contact with him, and moved to a low bench designed for Velrathi proportions. The cubs immediately climbed onto the bench with him. Thaisara settled onto a larger bench across from him. "My cubs confuse me," she began. "They have never behaved this way with outsiders. Even with members of our own people, they are selective. But with you, they show complete trust." Taewon stroked Kes absently, the cub purring louder under his touch. "I have been researching your culture. Officer Donghyun found texts about safe pack recognition." "Yes," Thaisara said. "Cubs learn early to identify those who will protect the pack. It is survival instinct. Our world is harsh. Cubs must know who to trust." She paused, her ears swiveling slightly. "But you are not Velrathi. You should not register as pack to them." "I do not understand it either," Taewon admitted. "I simply let them approach me. I did not threaten them or show fear." "It is more than that," Thaisara said. She leaned forward slightly, her posture indicating intense focus. "Your kind confuses us, Taewon of the humans. We studied your species before coming here. You are from a death world like us. You are predators. Your history is filled with violence. Yet you do not act as predators act." Taewon was not sure how to respond to that. "We can be violent," he said carefully. "But we try to be more than that." "Yes," Thaisara said. "This is what confuses us. We are predators who act like predators. We hunt, we dominate, we protect our territory. It is our nature. But you are predators who act like guardians. You have strength but choose restraint. You have weapons but prefer peace." She gestured to the cubs crawling over Taewon. "My cubs sense this. They recognize protective intent without dominance. This is rare. This is valuable." The conversation was interrupted by a chime at the entrance. A Velrathi aide entered and spoke quickly in their native language. Thaisara's ears flattened against her head, a sign of displeasure that Taewon had learned to recognize. The translator clicked on. "There is a problem in the council chamber. The Kalrix delegation is threatening to withdraw from negotiations. They claim the human Velrathi alliance creates an unfair advantage. They say 2 predator species should not be permitted to coordinate." Taewon stood carefully, disturbing the cubs who chirped in protest. "Ambassador Jiwoo will handle this." "No," Thaisara said, also rising. "I will handle this. The Kalrix fear predators. They see threat where there is only cooperation." She looked at Taewon with an expression he was beginning to understand. "But perhaps they need to see what my cubs see. Perhaps they need to understand that strength and protection are not the same as dominance and threat." They walked together to the council chamber, the 3 cubs following behind like a small honor guard. When they entered, the room fell silent. The Kalrix delegation, tall herbivores with elaborate horns and sophisticated technology, visibly tensed. Ambassador Jiwoo was in the middle of making an argument when she saw Thaisara and Taewon enter. She smoothly changed direction. "Matriarch Thaisara, thank you for joining us. Perhaps you can help clarify the concerns being raised." The lead Kalrix diplomat, his translator device producing a reedy voice, spoke. "We cannot accept a treaty where 2 predator species work together. It threatens the balance of power." Thaisara moved to the center of the room, her presence commanding. You fear predators, she said simply. This is natural. But you misunderstand what you see. She gestured to Taewon and then to herself. Yes, we are both from worlds where only the strong survive. But strength has many forms. As if on cue, little Vora toddled over to Taewon and sat on his feet, looking up at him with complete trust. The gesture was so innocent, so clearly affectionate, that several delegates made sounds of surprise. My cubs teach me, Thyssera continued. They show me that your species judges wrongly. You see teeth and claws and assume threat. But my cubs see deeper. They see intention. They see character. And they have chosen this human as safe pack. The Kalrix diplomat seemed at a loss for words. Around the chamber, other species watched with new interest. Ambassador Jiwoo seized the moment. Perhaps we have all been judging too quickly. Perhaps this negotiation is an opportunity to move past old fears and find new ways of cooperation. The session continued late into the station's night cycle, but something had shifted. The Kalrix were still cautious, but they listened. Other species began proposing new ideas, and throughout it all, 3 Velrathi cubs dozed at Taewon's feet, their gentle snoring a strange counterpoint to the serious discussions happening above them. The breakthrough in negotiations came 5 days after the Velrathi arrival. Ambassador Jiwoo proposed a joint administration model, where humans and Velrathi would oversee the disputed asteroid fields together, with profits distributed among all the claimant species. It was elegant, fair, and showed genuine promise. Taewon was not in the council chambers when the proposal was accepted in principle. He was doing what he did best, walking the station corridors during the quiet hours of the night cycle, checking security systems and making sure everything was peaceful. He had just finished inspecting a maintenance junction near the environmental systems when his communicator chirped. It was Sunmi, the head of station intelligence, and her voice was tight with controlled urgency. Taewon, I need you in the security center immediately. We have a situation. He was there in 4 minutes. Sunmi met him at the door, her face grim. The Velrathi quarters were breached 20 minutes ago. We did not catch it in real time because someone looped the security footage. Very sophisticated work. Taewon felt something cold settle in his stomach. Casualties? None, but Kes is missing. The world seemed to slow down. Kes, the smallest cub, the one who always climbed into his lap first. Missing. Show me, he said. Sunmi pulled up the recovered footage on the main display. It showed a figure in maintenance coveralls entering the Velrathi section through a service corridor. The figure moved with purpose, clearly knowing where the security blind spots were. 15 minutes later, the same figure emerged carrying a small container. We identified the maintenance uniform, Sunmi said. It belongs to a Kalrix technician named Vex. But Vex reported it stolen 2 days ago and his alibi checks out. Someone is using him as a cover. Where did the figure go? Sunmi highlighted the route on a station map. Docking Arm 7. There is a Kalrix cargo vessel there scheduled to depart in 90 minutes. Taewon stared at the map, his mind working through the implications. This is political. Someone wants to sabotage the negotiations by creating an incident. That is my assessment too, Sunmi agreed. If a Velrathi cub is harmed or killed while under our protection, the treaty is dead. Worse, it could mean war. Have you informed Matriarch Thyssera? Administrator Hee-jin is doing that now. But Taewon, there is a problem. By the time we go through proper channels, get authorization to search the vessel, coordinate with the Kalrix government, that ship will be gone. We have protocols, but protocols take time. Taewon looked at the map again. Docking Arm 7 was not far. The cargo vessel was right there. And somewhere on that ship was a terrified cub who had trusted him, who had climbed into his lap and fallen asleep, who had chosen him as safe pack. He made a decision that would probably end his career. I am going to that ship, he said quietly. Sunmi's eyes widened. Taewon, you cannot. Without authorization, without proper clearance, it is a violation of at least 12 different regulations. You could start a diplomatic incident. There is already an incident, Taewon said. He was already moving toward the equipment locker, pulling out a hand scanner and a small communication device. The question is whether we stop it or let it get worse. Taewon, Sunmi said, and her voice had changed. It was softer, less official. If you do this and it goes wrong, I cannot protect you. Hee-jin cannot protect you. You will face criminal charges. He looked at her, and something in his expression must have communicated his resolve because she sighed and turned back to her console. The cargo vessel is the Calrix Merchant Dawn, she said, pulling up specs. Standard hauler configuration. 3 decks. Crew of 12. Main cargo hold is on the middle deck. If I were hiding something, that is where I would put it. Among the containers where sensors cannot easily distinguish one heat signature from another. Thank you, Taewon said. I am not helping you, Sunmi replied, but she was already highlighting access routes on his scanner. I am simply providing information that any security chief would have access to. What you do with that information is your choice. Taewon moved through the station like a shadow. The night cycle meant most corridors were empty. The few beings he passed ignored him. Security chiefs walking around at odd hours was normal. Docking Arm 7 was quieter than the main bays. This was for cargo vessels, not diplomatic ships. The lighting was dimmer, more functional. He could see the Calrix Merchant Dawn through the observation windows, a blocky utilitarian vessel with cargo pods attached to its hull. The docking tube was not guarded. Why would it be? This was Harmony's Gate, a diplomatic station where peace was the entire purpose. The door was locked but not secured beyond standard measures. Taewon used his security override, knowing that this action was being logged, knowing that he was creating evidence of his unauthorized entry. He did not care. The interior of the cargo vessel smelled wrong. Most ships had their own particular scent, a combination of recycled air and whatever species crewed them. This one smelled of chemicals and something else, something organic and out of place. Taewon moved through the narrow corridors, his scanner active but set to passive mode. He did not want to alert anyone to his presence. The ship was quiet. Most of the crew were probably in their quarters during the pre-launch rest period. He found the cargo hold on the middle deck, just as Sunmi had suggested. The door was unsealed, which was unusual for a ship preparing for launch. He slipped inside. The hold was packed with containers, each labeled in Calrix script. His scanner showed multiple heat signatures, but most were consistent with standard cargo. Then he found it, a small signature tucked behind a large container near the back. The heat pattern was wrong for cargo. It was biological. It was small. It was moving weakly. Taewon moved between the containers following the scanner. He found a small crate pushed into a corner, partially hidden behind larger cargo. It was not standard shipping equipment. It looked hastily assembled. He knelt beside it and heard a sound that made his heart clench. A small whimper, barely audible. The crate was locked with a simple magnetic seal. Taewon forced it open, the metal protesting. Inside, curled in a ball, was Kes. She was breathing but clearly sedated. Her small body was trembling. I have you, Taewon whispered, reaching in carefully. You are safe now. Kes's eyes opened, slightly unfocused but aware. She made a small chirping sound. The one he had learned meant recognition. Even drugged, even terrified, she knew him. He lifted her out of the crate as gently as possible, cradling her against his chest. She was heavier than she looked, solid muscle even as a cub. Her small claws gripped his uniform weakly. You should not be here, human. Taewon turned slowly. A Calrix stood at the cargo hold entrance, a plasma weapon in his multi-fingered hand. He wore the insignia of a diplomatic aide, not a merchant crew member. You are making a mistake, Taewon said calmly, his arms still wrapped around Kes. Taking this cub will not stop the treaty. It will only create more problems. The Calrix's translator device produced an angry buzzing sound. Your alliance with predators threatens the natural order. Herbivore species have suffered under predator dominance for millennia. This treaty gives predators more power. We cannot allow it, so you kidnap a child. Taewon kept his voice level. How does that make you different from the predators you fear? It is necessary, the Calrix insisted, but his weapon hand was shaking slightly. When the Velrothi retaliate for their cub's death, other species will see the danger. They will understand why predators cannot be trusted. Taewon felt Kes's heartbeat against his chest, fast and weak from whatever drug they had given her. He thought about all the times he had protected beings weaker than himself, all the times he had stood between danger and innocence, all the times his choice had been to guard rather than harm. The natural order, Taewon said quietly, is that we protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is what makes us civilized. That is what separates us from simple animals. He looked directly at the Calrix. You call yourself evolved, but you are planning to kill a child to make a political point. Who is the real predator here? The Calrix's weapon wavered. For a moment, Taewon thought he might actually lower it. Then several things happened at once. The cargo hold door burst open and two shapes flew through. Rin and Vora, the other two cubs, launched themselves at the Calrix with all the fury their small bodies could muster. Behind them came Officer Dong Hyun and a full security team. The Calrix, startled, fired his weapon wildly. The plasma bolt scorched the ceiling. Then he was buried under angry Velrothi cubs who clearly understood that he had hurt their sister. Dong Hyun helped pull the cubs off before they did serious damage. The Calrix was detained, his weapon secured. The security team spread out, securing the cargo hold. Taewon knelt down, still holding Kes as Rin and Vora pressed against him. All three cubs were reunited, and despite Kes's sedation, she managed a weak purr. The medical bay of Harmony's Gate was designed to treat dozens of different species, but the Velrothi cubs still managed to look out of place among the sterile white surfaces and blinking monitors. Kes lay on an examination table that was far too large for her, looking small and vulnerable. A medical drone hovered nearby, scanning her vital signs while the station's xenobiologist, a gentle luminari named Sola, worked with careful precision. Taewon stood against the wall, watching. His uniform was rumpled and torn where Kes's claws had gripped him. He had not left since they brought her in. Rin and Vora lay on the floor near his feet, their eyes never leaving their sister. "The sedative is clearing her system," Sola said, her bioluminescent body pulsing a soothing blue. "She will recover fully. They used a standard tranquilizer, nothing exotic. She was fortunate." Taewon nodded but said nothing. His mind was still processing everything that had happened. The unauthorized boarding, the confrontation, the moment when he thought the Calrix might actually shoot, the relief when Dong Hyun and the team had arrived. The door to the medical bay opened and Matriarch Thisara entered. The space seemed to shrink around her presence. She moved directly to the examination table, and Sola wisely floated aside to give her room. Thisara's clawed hand touched Kes's small head with surprising gentleness. The cub's eyes opened, still clouded from the drugs, but she made a soft chirping sound. Thisara responded with a low rumble from deep in her chest, something that the translator did not attempt to interpret. After a long moment, Thisara turned to Taewon. Her golden eyes were unreadable, but her posture spoke of controlled emotion. "You boarded that vessel alone," she said. "It was not a question." "Yes," Taewon replied simply. "You violated protocols. You risked an incident. You could have been killed." "Yes." Thisara's ears swiveled forward, a sign of intense focus. "Why?" Taewon looked at Kes on the table, at Rin and Vora lying at his feet. He thought about how to explain something that was not rational, that came from a place deeper than logic. "She trusted me," he said finally. "When your cubs chose me as safe pack, they gave me trust I did not earn. The only way to earn it was to prove they were right, to prove I would protect them, even at cost to myself." Thisara was silent for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked everyone in the room. She reached out and placed her clawed hand on Taewon's shoulder, a gesture of pack bonding among Velrothi. "You risk much for my daughter," she said quietly. "This is not forgotten among my people." Before Taewon could respond, Administrator Heejin entered the medical bay with Ambassador Jiwoo. Both looked exhausted, their faces showing the strain of the past few hours. "Security Chief Taewon," Heejin began, and her tone was formal. "We need to discuss your actions." "I understand," Taewon said. He had known this was coming. "I violated multiple protocols. I boarded a vessel without authorization. I created a potential diplomatic incident. I am prepared to accept the consequences." Heejin looked at him for a long moment. Then something in her expression softened slightly. "The Calrix government has issued a formal apology. The aide who kidnapped Kes was working with a radical faction that has been disavowed. They are cooperating fully with the investigation." Ambassador Jiwoo stepped forward. "More than that, the incident has actually strengthened the treaty negotiations. Other species saw how you risked everything for a Velrothi cub. They saw that humans and Velrothi are not forming a predator alliance to dominate others. They saw exactly what Matriarch Thisara has been trying to show them, that strength and protection are not the same as dominance. That does not change what I did, Taewon said. No, Heejin agreed. But it changes the context. The Velrathi delegation has formally requested that no disciplinary action be taken against you. The Calrix government has seconded that request, as have 4 other delegations. It seems you have become something of a symbol, Taewon, the human who risks everything to protect the innocent. Taewon felt uncomfortable with that characterization. He had simply done what needed to be done. But he said nothing. There will be an official investigation. Heejin continued. You will need to provide full testimony, but I do not think you need to worry about criminal charges. She paused, then added more quietly, though perhaps next time you could at least inform someone before you go off to rescue kidnapped cubs from cargo vessels. I informed Sunmi, Taewon said. Yejin raised an eyebrow. Sunmi says she has no recollection of any such conversation, and that you clearly acted on your own initiative without consultation. The corner of Taewon's mouth twitched in what might have been almost a smile. Then I must have been mistaken. The medical drone beeped and Sola floated closer to the examination table. Kes is waking more fully now. She is asking for food and her siblings. As if on cue, Rin and Vora jumped up and rushed to the table. They made happy chirping sounds, and Kes, still groggy but improving, responded in kind. The 3 cubs began nuzzling each other in what was clearly a reunion. Tessera watched her cubs, then looked at Taewon again. I would like to speak with you privately. Tomorrow, when Kes has recovered more, there is something I must discuss. Taewon nodded. Of course, matriarch. The next day, Taewon found himself once again in the Velrathi quarters. This time, Kes was with her siblings, much recovered, and playing with toys that involved pouncing and chasing. She looked perfectly healthy, though Sola had recommended she rest for a few more days. Tessera sat across from Taewon, her posture relaxed, but her expression serious. The treaty negotiations are concluding well, she began. The joint administration proposal will be accepted. My people will work alongside humans to oversee the asteroid fields, and all claimant species will benefit. It is a good outcome. I am glad, Taewon said. This outcome exists because of trust, Thaisara continued. Trust that began when my cubs chose you. Trust that grew when you risked everything to save Kes. Trust that showed other species we are not what they fear. She paused, watching the cubs play. Kes tackled Rin, and they rolled across the floor in a ball of fur and flailing paws. My people need to understand humans better, Thaisara said. We thought we knew what predators were. We thought all Deathworld species were like us, driven by dominance and territorial instinct. But you are different. Your kind protects even when there is no benefit to you. You guard even when the guarded are not your own species. She looked directly at Taewon. I wish to invite you to our home world, as an honored guest, so my cubs can know more of the strange predators who guard without dominating, so my people can learn what you have to teach. Taewon was caught off guard. Matriarch, I am honored, but I am just a security chief. I am not a diplomat or an ambassador. I would not know how to represent my species to yours. You already have, Tessera said simply. You represented humanity perfectly when you stood still and let my cubs judge you, when you knelt so they could reach you, when you risked everything to save Kes. These actions speak louder than any words. Taewon looked at the cubs, who had paused in their playing to watch the adults talk. Kes met his eyes and made a happy chirping sound. I will need to discuss this with Administrator Hyejin and Ambassador Jiwoo, he said. They have already approved, Thaisara replied with what might have been amusement. Ambassador Jiwoo said that sometimes you show what humanity is better than any negotiation could. Administrator Hyejin said you have earned a very long vacation after the stress you caused her. Despite himself, Taewon smiled at that. Then I accept, he said. Though I warn you, I may not be what your people expect. You are exactly what we need, Thaisara said, a predator who chooses to be a guardian, a warrior who chooses to be a protector. This is what my people must learn, if we are to find our place in a galaxy that fears us. The cubs, perhaps sensing that something important had been decided, abandoned their toys and crowded around Taiwan. Kes climbed into his lap. Rin pressed against his left side and Vora claimed his right. They purred in unison, a sound that vibrated through his bones. Thesera watched this with her unreadable golden eyes. "They love you," she said simply. "In our culture, cubs do not love easily, but when they do, it is absolute and unchanging. You have become their safe pack, Taewon. That is a bond that will last their entire lives." Taewon stroked Kes's soft fur, feeling the warmth of the 3 cubs surrounding him. He thought about how strange his life had become, how a simple security job had turned into something much more complicated and meaningful. "I will do my best not to disappoint them," he said quietly. "You will not," Thesera replied with certainty. "Of this I have no doubt.